in some ways, I think First Timothy and Second Timothy as well are almost handbooks for practical ministry. And where we are in chapter 5 of First Timothy is very much on the runway details about this is how you perform your role and in your ministry, Timothy. And he's been talking about widows. What do you do about widows? In verse 8, he gets real specific and says, no widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, is well known for her good deeds. Those are three big things. And then he says, okay, if you, all right, here are the kind of good deeds I'm talking about, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people. Now, we talked about washing the feet of the Lord's people yesterday, and the real point of that is humble service to God's people. And that, in Paul's day, that would have actually, she probably would have literally washed the feet of the Lord's people in a service. I mean, I'm searching for a way to make what they did in Century 1 have some kind of a corresponding thing in Century 21. And for most of us, as I said last time, we're not part of religious traditions that literally practice foot washing. The point of foot washing goes back to, as I said last time, when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, and he said, "I'm leaving you an example. You don't understand what I'm doing now, but later you will." In our culture, I don't want to minimize the importance of and the value of what Jesus did for the apostles. I certainly don't want to minimize the impact that it had on them. And I don't even want to say how that it's silly for modern churches to literally wash feet. I don't think that. But I do think for most of us, we're not a part of a church that has a tradition, formalized tradition of literal, physically washing one another's feet. Well, okay. And then he goes on, and here's another aspect of the good deeds of these widows. Helping those in trouble and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. Helping those in trouble. That's a couple of things I just thoughts. First of all, there will never be a shortage of people in trouble. Helping them. Now, I'm going to kind of get into a deal here, so just a little spoiler alert. Helping them is not sometimes as complex as we sometimes want to make it. And sometimes the other side of that is when we do what our mind is, in our mind, what we want to do is help them. And so we do things that actually may not be helpful. So we're the beneficiary way more than they are of our efforts to help. Let's just take a look at, there are times when helping you is hurting you. To help someone in the best kind of way, I think that amounts to what can I do that will help you to do what you can for yourself? Well, it's a weird way of saying it, but if I do for you what you could do for yourself, I am robbing you of the opportunity to become more and more responsible for yourself and to act more and more responsibly. And you can see this probably the most easily in raising kids. Kids who grew up and never had to clean their room or make their bed. They never had to do their laundry. They never had to pitch in on cleaning up in the kitchen. They never had to pay for the gas that went in the car. They never, on and on and on. Everything seemed to be done for them. They struggle. In my counseling practice, I can just tell you, folks who grew up that way struggle to figure out how to live responsibly as an adult. All these, and see, parents who they do all this stuff for the kid because they love the kid. It's not like they're intentionally doing things that will hurt and harm and hold them back. Not at all. But what they intended out of love actually resulted in a holding back of the kids learning to take responsibility. They actually stunt the development of that kid into maturity. Now, there are other examples of that in what Paul's talking about. He's not really, I don't think he's talking about this, parent-child thing. I think it's what he's talking about is how widows are, well, first of all, because widows were in a category of pretty serious, complicated need in their culture, they, I believe, had a higher awareness. They noticed people's needs because they themselves were needy. But you know what? That doesn't always happen. Sometimes needy people only see their own need. On the other hand, the kind of people that Paul's talking about here when he's describing the good deeds of these widows who belong on the widows list, their need has made them sensitive to the needs of other people. And they do what they can to help them. The principle, though, that I talked about, how out of love and sincerity, a parent can do way too much for the child, robbing them of this growth toward maturity. That principle applies no matter what the age of the person. When I was at Canyon Ridge, one of my roles there was I was the supervisor for our benevolence ministry. I didn't run it. I just supervised our people who were smart, very smart, committed, and compassionate, and wise. They had developed this sense of what I think Paul's talking about, how these widows helped people in trouble. They had this great sniffer. They could kind of smell when people were trying to work the system as opposed to genuinely seeking help. And there were a lot of people who genuinely needed help, were seeking, in sincerity, help. I think that's a skill a lot of the time. that you can learn. And sometimes it's a gift that God gives in terms of discernment. These widows on the list were discerning and compassionate. They didn't have much in terms of means. Their resources were very limited, perhaps the most limited of anybody in the church. In spite of that, they responded to the needs of people so that they could help those in trouble. All kinds of trouble. And because of that, there are all kinds of ways to help people in trouble. Okay, I could go, gosh, I get all, anyway, I've already said more than you need to hear. Let's go. They help those in trouble and devoting herself to all kinds of good works. When you devote yourself to anything, it means you spend time, energy, financial resources to be devoted. It's not like there's no casual approach for those who are truly devoted to anything. If you're devoted to all kinds of good deeds, doing all kinds of good deeds means you are constantly vigilant for ways that you can contribute, for good deeds that you could do. And now, all of us have encountered people who do good deeds, and their motive is not very sincere. Well, no, that's not true. It may not be clean, although it may be sincere, because I think some people's sincere motive is, I want to look great. I want people to notice that I'm such a good man or woman, a good person. That's not what this is about. These widows are devoted. They have devoted themselves to all kinds of good deeds, meaning doing good deeds is a natural outflow of their lives. That's the way they're wired. That this is not like, they don't just ponder and then cherry pick good deeds in order to look good. And okay. So what are we going to do? Because you might be a widow or you might be a widower. And these ideas may broadly apply in your life, but you may not be a widow or widower. What do you do with this? Well, first of all, I believe that because of how our world is, because of the culture we live in, it's easy to not be very aware of widows. Because the widows in our world, widows get taken care of in lots of different ways. We have social programs from the government. We have retirement funds and insurance and all sorts of things. And yet, widows and widowers today have needs. They may not be quite the financial needs of these first century widows, but wow, don't forget the widows. In our church, whatever church you're a part of, if there's not an awareness of how do we help these people, how do we care for them, something's not right. So there's that side. The second side is as an individual. I'm thinking of me now. I gotta have my radar up so that I will notice widows, and I can because I notice them, I can be open-handed toward them and I can do for them whatever I can that I notice that they need. Well, I've rambled. Tomorrow, my goal is to not ramble. I'll see you then on So Care with Stevie Boy.